So today we are going to be not necessarily replicating, but building a new workbench. So this workbench is something I bought. It's a cobalt workbench. I guess something fell off here because that doesn't look like it used to. Anyway, I love the look of this, like the white steel and the gray and silver and everything. And so what I've always loved is I've always wanted a garage that has a very consistent look where you don't have a red toolbox, a white workbench, and so on and so forth, right? So what we kind of have here basically are these 2x2 steel tubes here. And if you feel underneath, it's actually a flat plate, pretty thick. This is probably about a 2x6 going under here. And then this one on the corner is kind of a 2x2, but it's wrapped metal, so it kind of comes all the way back around here. So I'm not gonna be able to go find all of these pieces and wrap the metal the same way that they do these components here. This is pretty thick stuff. I mean, it's probably like a 18 gauge steel, so not terribly thick. I bought 14 gauge 2x2 steel tubes, so we're gonna kind of replicate this look. The casters I got are about a 5.1 inches tall. These are about 6, so we'll have to adjust the height down a little bit of where my bar starts, because the end goal is to have exactly the same height topper. So it'll go straight across from this cabinet to the next cabinet and have a very consistent, clean look, kind of a rolling workbench. So this one is the one I'm going to build is about 6 feet wide. So in length, it'll be 6 feet wide, same depth. So it has a very consistent, clean look when it is rolled up next to this one. You know, I'm not gonna be able to do drawers or anything like that because the drawers here, again, they're kind of manufactured. I have plenty of space. This one is not really great for woodwork or for steel working because it is a wood top. I don't really want to do too much welding on this. The new one, I may do a wood topper on, but do an epoxy finish or cover. That way it's a little more durable. But or I may do a steel wrap over the top of it so that it can handle the heat if I do any welding or anything like that. I just can't stand working on a metal surface with metal. Just the clanging and tinging definitely makes it harder whenever you're trying to shoot videos. So that'll be about it. So these are the 2x2 steel tubes I bought. Like I said, they're 14 gauge. They're pretty thick. I'll be able to cut them and use them for the majority of this. I have two 10-foot sections that fit in the car without being cut. And then I unfortunately had to cut two. These are both 76 inch, so I can get a 72 piece out of that. And then I have these two over here, which are both 44 inches. I usually can get 2 length pieces going back into the cabinet. So each of these are kind of cut for a specific size, but also the transportability. So currently I am using this 3-foot by 6-foot workbench here. It's kind of just got some cheap wood I got from Lowe's on this galvanized steel frame. The wheels are hard to roll. They're just kind of these small, no, they're not even on bearings of any sort, so they kind of are a little clunky to move around, but it's just not as steady as what you could have. They don't lock, so it's kind of free rolling. I also would prefer if it's higher, so the other cobalt cabinet comes up about this height. This height right here is a little too low. You can get up on top of the things you're working on, so it kind of is great for working on an engine, tossing the engine around. But it also is a little too deep for this garage, so I'm going to try to build a new one. It's going to come back a little bit, not as deep. Obviously you can see all the clutter here. I have all these things that are underneath it that kind of make it even harder to get around. So ideally with the new one, we're going to have a shelf at the bottom. I'll be able to throw a couple things on that shelf, and again, it'll be very mobile compared to this one. And this is the large bottle here that I have for welding. This one needs to be moved. Ideally, I would like it to sit on the cart with the welder. So I may stagger the welder here, tank in the back, and then the cover will go over the top of the welder. That way this is no longer taking up space on top of the cabinet. So it'll be down underneath here in its own cubby. Let's go ahead and get started on that. The weapon of choice today is we have 2 angle grinders. This one has a paddle sander wheel on it. I use this to usually create a polish-like look on the steel. We won't be doing that this time because we are going for a powder-coated look with the white powder coat. I always have 2 of these available, not if one goes down or breaks. These were really cheap. These were about 20 bucks, but that way you're not switching between a grinder blade and a cutoff wheel. Kind of less hassle. You use through your wheels a little better and you're not losing them and trying to fight this tool all the time. They're not too hard to take apart. Just line up the tool, lock it in place, rotate it, pull it off, you get a fresh disc. I know a lot of people, when they talk about doing projects like this, they go, well, the other person is able to do this affordably, but they have invested a lot in all these tools. And I'm going to show you what tools I'm using and why it really does not cost a whole lot. Like I said again, these are about 20 bucks each, so I bought 2 of them. You only really need 1, so 20 bucks for angle grinders. The disc sets, for the big cutoff disc, is about $4.50 per disc. You really will need 1 grinder wheel for a project like this. Now for cutting, it depends on how complex you make it. You can very well go through at least 3 of these discs. Now they usually come in packs of 5 for about 8 bucks. Definitely they're not terrible price-wise. I mean, it's just part of the construction process. So we'll go ahead and set those aside. We'll get some steel up here and we'll start cutting. I've already marked some of the steel, although some of the steel is marked incorrectly as I kind of changed my design last minute. I want to go ahead and mark off a 2-inch section here. My marker's a little dry, but just enough I can see it. And what you want to do is we're going to draw from this corner to here at a 45-degree angle. What this is going to allow us to do is when I cut this off and I take a second piece of metal, or I can lay that second piece of metal into this and at the same 45-degree cut, and that gives me a very clean, smooth corner where I don't have to do caps on my metal. Both of these length pieces cut, flip over. We'll line it up with the edge here. I'm going to use this table as a little bit of a jig. So now you can see how cutting another piece to cross between here would be advantageous. Also gives you a large surface to weld. So total length here is 25 inches. So we'll cut a total 25 and then 2 more notches like this into it. Ended up cutting it perfectly on both ends and at almost a perfect angle. All right, so we've cut all of our pieces that I need for the bottom layer and the top layer. I haven't cut my uprights yet because I do want to go ahead, weld this up, get the casters because I do want to make sure that the height for the overall cabinet is going to be correct once I get the casters. I know it says 5.1 inches, but I would hate to bet everything on that. So I'll go ahead and weld this up to the top, the bottom, and then cut those vertical pieces tomorrow when we get the wheels in. So everything's grounded. This is 14 gauge. I'm running about 19 feet per minute on the wire feed and 20.3 for my voltage. So whenever you do these welds like this, what will happen, and you can always adjust for this in the future, if you look down the length of it, these were lined up a second ago, perfectly with the table, and you can see how right there it's come part from the table, both on this side and this side. The heat on the inside here, when you make that weld at a real high temperature, it ends up closing and pulling itself together. Now I've welded a lot, so what you can do is, fortunately, because this is so long, you can go to the other end and make an adjustment. And so I'm going to go to the other side and I'm going to go pull them apart. The total width over here needs to be 25. Looks like we're short by 1/4 of an inch. So I'll go ahead and stretch it out just a little bit more. And watch your previous welds over the end, because you want to make sure you're not twisting the metal either. Come back over on this side. I'm going to go ahead and finish up some of these welds. What we have done here is I've jigged up the frame. Unfortunately, I had this piece here that was kind of the end piece, and it wasn't quite long enough, and rather than waste this piece, I wanted to really try to use it. So I went ahead and just added this little section here. This will be hidden. This is the bottom panel. So what we'll have over here on the far side where it opens up is where your feet could go if you had a chair or something, you're working on a bench. This section here, the goal is we're going to hold the tall bottle of argon and CO2 right here, and then the welder will actually sit right here next to it on the lower level. So I'm going to go ahead and weld these items up. I've already got it clamped down, so we shouldn't get the flex that we had a moment ago. So I have one clamp here, one here, and we'll get that bow out. I'll also do a little less, give a little less heat whenever I'm going through this process too. Let's get the welding gloves on before I burn myself. And then a lot of preparation. We need our cover. We're just not going to have a cover today. Where is it? Am I blind? I think it fell off over here. Perfect. What was that? Well, that's not any good. Always keep pliers within reach. What the heck? We're not blowing anything up. I'm not sure. I'm looking at 16 and 19. I didn't think I lowered it that much. We'll go ahead and increase the wire feed speed, but maybe reseat the ground. I'm thinking the ground's having a little issue. Oh, I tacked it, but that was terrible. All right, that should do that one. I do want to keep welding on this table, but I think I'm going to burn off the wood here, so now I can weld out here away from the table. So this gap, what I'll probably do is I'm going to go get a slice of metal, try to bridge this. It's not really a big deal the way the structure will work out, because it's going to be super strong regardless. I don't know if I'll weld it down these lengths. What I'm going to show you here is, so here's a great example of how to use, if you have one hand and you don't have the jig, right? So this bottom half is 25 inches in depth, and that's what we want. We want 25 inches. The top is 24 because it's slightly bowed. So the solution to this is we want to weld along the back half of this joint. Now, it's already at a little tilt here, so we want to make sure we pull this part to the right dimensions, and we'll leave this separate. We won't weld up here, and then what we'll do is once we have a good weld at the bottom half, I'll pull this over, tack it, and then we're going to check this adjustment here, because I do want to make sure that this gets twisted down, and I do have a nice gap right here so that it should be square when we re-weld it and we pull down on it. To do that, what we want to do first is we want to make sure this is correctly vertical, and as you can see, this is how far off we are. So that right there is straight up and down. Like I said, it's about an inch off exactly. So here's our inch right there. Good. Good. Now, I will tack it on the inside first. That being, reason being is that when I tack it, it's going to pull it forward. And then I can adjust it back by tacking it in the rear. And the reason you want to do that is you much rather have a positive bow back out than a negative inwards. The reason being is it's easier to pull something together than it is for you to push it apart. So what we're seeing here is the 3 stages of the process to put these casters in place. So as you can see, there's a weld here and here along this plate. And I'll go ahead and let's move over to one of the other welds. So I took that plate right here and I had 2 magnets on it, tacked it in place, and then ran the beads. Made sure that it was exactly 4 inches by 3 inches. This caster is a little bit less than that. It's about 2.5 inches by 3 inches, or 3.5 inches. And then I drew small holes in this. And as you can see here, I have the bolts in there and they fit pretty snug. Now this one's pretty strong because they are welded in the corner. Now this one here is not. It has a little bit of movement to it, and I did weld the bottom side and the top side. What I'm going to do here is I've already cut these 3 little brackets, and these 3 little brackets I'm going to weld along the edge of that. Then we'll go ahead and I'm going to cut a cap for this, weld it in place, and then grind it down so it looks real uniform on this end. And then of course on this side, on the right, we're going to be welding kind of a section in here, kind of building the base for the 2 shelves, bottom shelf and the mid shelf for the welder, as well as leaving the open section here for the tank. So let's go ahead and keep going.